Hey folks, Flo here at Scaling Up. The conference just wrapped up and I just thought it would be nice to speak with the founder and chairman himself, Jeff Passmore. How are you feeling?
I feel great, actually. I'm not as tired as I was this time last year, so something must have gone well.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's a nice metric. So 8 years of scaling up. Can you just run us through briefly kind of what 8 years looks like? What maybe has changed? How do you look back on 8 years?
Well, we started in 2016 and we just sort of came out of nowhere. There had been no national bioeconomy conference in Canada up until then. And so we didn't have a mailing list or anything like that, but we managed to attract 145 people. And then over the years, it's slowly built. And this year we had 225. So, and we actually had 8 different federal government departments this year here. But you know what was interesting this year? It was that for the first time, we had way more than normal post-secondary education. So we had 9 universities and colleges here. And so that says to me something that we didn't see in previous years, which is the young people and the academic institutions are very interested in climate change and the industrial bioeconomy and how it can provide jobs to the next generation.
Yeah, and of course, jobs is very important for any economy, for any government as well. I'm wondering if there's anything that has happened over the 8 years that you did not see coming, that you did not anticipate, whether it's collateral damage or otherwise.
I didn't see myself doing this for 8 years. I didn't know how long it would last, but it just, and now I have to ask myself, well, how much will we continue to do it? And I can see us probably doing it for another 2 or 3 years. But at some point, I'd like to pass the torch, because, I love doing it. We have a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work too. There's only my wife and I that put it together over the course of sort of 6 months, although my wife has a full-time job working for the government of Canada. So she only comes to do stuff in the evenings and whatever. And then we hire some staff just to help us with the running of the conference itself. But
that in and of itself, Jeff, is remarkable. Having organized conferences before, it's just very, very impressive. So is there any theme that sort of came to the surface in particular this year?
Well, of course, the theme that we always try to have a subtitle, and last year it was Further and Faster, which is interesting because that's, maybe it was just serendipity, but we hear a lot during the course of the last 12 months about how we have to go so much further and so much faster. It's only, people say 7 years until 2030, but actually January 2030 is 6 years away. So it's not like we've got, okay, if you're talking about the end of 2030, then it's 7 years. So last year it was Further and Faster. This year it was The Future is Now. And it's because it is now. We have to act now. We can't say, well, okay, the future hasn't happened yet. And this was part of the thing I was hoping we could, by having senior people from the government here, we had a senior ADM from Innovation, Science and Economic Development. We had a senior ADM from Agriculture Canada, and we had a Director General from Natural Resources Canada. And the whole idea here is, okay, guys, can we move this forward faster? Because what we kept hearing about so we had speakers from Spain, Finland, of course the US, and they're all talking about how the environment and the industrial bioeconomy is a big deal there. When you look at what the Biden administration is doing in the industrial bioeconomy, Canada's going to get left behind. And my concern is that we'll just end up exporting the jobs and importing the products and materials that are biomass based. I was surprised. I was very surprised to hear the ADM from Agriculture Canada say that he didn't seem to be aware of the USDA BioPreferred program. I thought everybody knew about that, at Agriculture Canada. But
something that comes to mind is in our interview with Jim Lane, who I kind of see as the Jeff Passmore of the US, having his own event and also a publication.
I think he thinks that I'm the Jim Lane of Canada. I think because I followed his example. He had that conference. He calls it Advanced Bioeconomy Leadership Conference. Yeah. It's a fantastic conference every year in Washington D.C. And so he's had it a lot longer than I've had this one. But yeah.
Well, in any case, it's very nice to see you together. And he mentioned in his interview, as I primed him, saying Canada often looks up to the US as its big brother, which is quite natural. He said, well, when it comes to biomass, Canada is the big brother.
Well, certainly in terms of quantity. We've got, as I said, 348 million hectares of forest, 60 million hectares of ag land. We've got all kinds of residue that can't be, like organics, that municipalities like Toronto and Vancouver don't want landfilled anymore. But actually, you know what Jim Lane said to me that was the most fun part was when he came in yesterday morning and we had the live jazz playing at breakfast, and he said, "Wow, this is so classy. I'm envious, because he doesn't do that at his conference, Plus the food is way better here than the conference he has. Oh, don't let Jim Lane hear me say that, though."
A little bit of healthy competition and Canadian class perhaps. So looking into the future, hypothetically, if you were still doing another 8, you're probably going to take a big sigh as I say that. But what do you think we could achieve in 8 years, and what do you think scaling up would look like in 8 years?
Well, I would like to think we could do it a lot faster than in 8 years. I'd like to think that, although I keep hoping this every year, but when we get together again next year and when we get together again in 2025, that there's been a whole lot of progress made. Actually, we heard today a representative of the government of British Columbia. He didn't do a formal announcement, but he sort of said, stay tuned because BC is going to come out with a bioeconomy strategy. So here we are again, where we have provinces taking the lead over the federal government. And what we don't need is a hodgepodge of different rules and regulations across the country. We need kind of, some kind of uniformity, stability, whatever. So yes, I'd like to think that probably not by next year, because the government doesn't move that fast. And then, of course, if we have a change in government, well, then you're starting your lobbying all over again, trying to sell the notion. But I'd like to think, if you ask me, like, okay, in 8 years, Canada better have a national bioeconomy strategy, a very aggressive one, or we're going to end up like we ended up during the pandemic, where we don't make any vaccines and had to import everything. So it'll be just the same as that.
That's a great example. And finally, do you already know the theme for next year?
Actually, you know what? I do. It's printed right here. Bigger impact, smaller footprint.
And what does that mean?
Well, it means that the bioeconomy can have more of an impact in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions than a lot of the other technologies that are out there, and have a smaller footprint, meaning your greenhouse gas footprint. Everybody's talking about how do we reduce our footprint, our environmental footprint. But there's opportunities in every industry to reduce our environmental footprint. So that's what the theme is for next year.
Brilliant. This was Jeff Passmore, founder and chair of Scaling Up, and the website is scalingupconference.ca. And see you next year.